Colonize Africa, we needed to firstly understand how colonization was structured in terms of right on top of the list is governance, how the governing of the community was structured, where was the centers, where were the centers of power in terms of managing the community. So we had a royal system that was working through consultative spaces with the leaders and the elders, the wise people and the herbalists and stuff like that, which was the weaponry. Herbs were not used only for healing, they were also used for war. And people would actually be able to send bees and etc. and manipulate nature to fight. So initially what you are talking about, decolonization, firstly we needed to learn how to decolonize our governance systems. As we have already discussed on neocolonialism and the colonial system, which uses the Roman Dutch law for management of the communities. Right now, Africa is using the Roman Dutch law. The question is, where is Rome and where is Dutch in Africa? So that law is misplaced altogether because you're managing people in Africa using a foreign law. That law comes with its statutory regulations. What is marriage? Comes with its own regulations. How do you set up your businesses? Comes with regulation who owns the land. That translates itself into the constitution, which many African countries think that they have a constitution. Meanwhile, the constitution is a brand new yoke of colonialism itself. So the first bus stop is we need to decolonize our legal framework. We need to decolonize our governance systems. We need to find the heartbeat of indigenous governance systems, which then becomes way of protection and running the societal issues and disputes and etc. And as we said, the issues of oaths, for example, finds itself in the governance systems, the concepts of jails and policing, for example, land ownership and of marriage rights and marriage ceremonies and certificates and stuff like that. You would then find out immediately, you start tampering with governance and saying we don't want the constitution, which is a big hindrance because African governments think that when they put a president in power, the president will be able to act and do anything. But we forget that by making him president, we have actually put him on the yoke of the same system that we are trying to fight against. Therefore, the first format, first bus stop, first requirement of decolonization, how do we decolonize our governance? We have the House of Traditional Leaders, which has been left only for culture and entertainment. But all the governments in Africa, so sorry to say this, all the governments in Africa are crime scenes. They are all criminals in that they are looking over land which does not belong to them. The land belongs to the indigenous people, the kings and the royalties, who then sit their people in their various tribes into those lands. So when the colonial system came and they removed the leaders of the community and they placed themselves, they're starting to collect taxes from people as if they're the colonizers themselves. How do we do that? We need to go back and reinstate the Maasai, the Luos, and the rest of the tribes into their rightful places and let each place, each leader develop his own land. Right now, we have the capital city mindset, where the whole country is collecting money from everywhere, moving it into Nairobi. So now you have a rich city, Harare, rich city, Dar es Salaam, rich city, Lusaka, rich city. And once you have that kind of an ideology, then you're causing migration to move away from the poor villages, and everyone is running into the city. Now look at the impact on infrastructure within the cities. And unfortunately, many of our African leaders are not yet that educated to understand that the system that they're inheriting was only designed to occupy so many people. The water in this city was meant only for so many people. The roads in the city were only built to drive so many cars. The electricity was only for so many people. Now you have, after independence, a city which was built to live 300,000, 600,000 people. Now we're sitting on 4 million, 5 million people. And then we start complaining. The roads are bad. The hospitals are bad. The schools are not enough. But you're not aware that you have taken too many people into an infrastructure that cannot contain those people. And when you look at the floods that have just happened in Kenya here, it's a big indication of the limitations of our cities. And the lowlands were never meant for people to live in. And when you see a disaster like this happening, you must know it once happened. It will happen again. And so we need to start building new cities in highlands, in the mountainsides, and leave the plains for grazing and agriculture and etc. When you come to the Lozi tribes in Zambia, for example, every season, when seasons change, then they move upland because all the swamps are going to be full of water. And when the swamps dry down, then they go back to the lowlands. But now, because of civilization, some people have decided to stay in those lowlands. It has not yet happened. It might take 10 years. It might take 20 years, like in Kenya. It has taken maybe 50 years for you to have such a flood. But the day it happens, then it will be a national disaster. We say in our culture, water never forgets where it once flowed. As such, the concept of governance and rulership and how to guide and lead people needs to find its intelligence in the indigenous knowledge systems so that we do not give people properties in wetlands, in the swamps, where they're going to be drowning in water. That's poor planning. The lowlands, which can flood, you cannot tell me that you're going to build schools and homes in flatlands where we know that disasters such as floods will come up. So the concept of governance is important. You're not only dealing with the municipality, road construction, how do you house people, how do you settle people, how do you rule them, how do you arrest them, how do they pay for their crimes, how do they buy land, and so that whole concept of law, the judiciary, needs to be decolonized. After dealing with the pillar on governance, the next pillar is agriculture. Agriculture, we're talking about indigenous foods vis-a-vis genetically modified foods. How do we preserve ourselves as Africans? Do we want to live on pizzas now? Do we want to live in supermarkets? Do we want to live with GMO foods? Do we want to live with processed foods? And I'm glad that our generation is waking up to discover that health is not in fine foods. These traditional foods that we could think they are for the uncivilized and uneducated. In fact, the poorer the people are, the healthier their diet is. The richer they become, the more sick they become. In fact, many of our diseases that we are suffering from right now are what I want to call colonial diseases. We never had a problem of fibroids, problems of cancer, problems of diabetes, problems of opportunistic diseases, which are caused by poor immunity, which is a result directly of poor agriculture. So agriculture for me does not only talk about feeding the people, but feeding the people the right food. Right now, as we speak, many people's stomachs are full of food, but they're empty of health. The fact that your stomach is full does not mean that you're healthy at all. So again, you come back to my head, which is the diet, menu diet. How do we plant these kind of foods? And how do we make them available on our tables so that people can be healthy? But agriculture is land. We need access to land so that we can plant food. And I want to challenge African governments to particularly start considering small seeds as a solution to food security. Small seeds. These are your rapocos, these are sorghums, these are your millets. Those are drought resistant. You just plant them as soon as quick as they germinate, you're sure you're going to harvest from them. But this maize meal has only been here for the past 100 years from Brazil and etc. It was an imported thing. Now, ugali, maize meal has become a staple diet, but it is not original with us. The one that we had with those yellow, pink, orange, purple kind of maize meal, which are small seeds also. So we need to do a seed bank strategy for agriculture, that we harvest our small seeds, keep them in store, and start reintroducing them back into the community, because our health is our wealth. Without good health, even the richest country is poor. As such, agriculture is critical, because as people eat, so they become. And what people eat is what they become. And if we are not careful on agriculture, we're going to pay a big bill on health. The imports and exports can only come as long as our stomachs are full. We must plant what we eat and eat what we plant. We can't convert Kenya into a place of planting coffee. Who eats coffee? We cannot be planting all this coffee only to sell it, instead of us planting food that we can eat. So we must actually make an allocation that we get full first. And when we are full, the surplus, that was goes for export. But you can't build a community based on exports only. Here is the foolishness. You plant your coffee, you take all of it, they go and make coffee, they make chocolates. After you sell the coffee, at a cheaper price, by the way, because it's not processed. You bring back the money. When the money comes back into the country, you take the same money to the same people to buy food. Then who is stupid here? Whose brain is not working? How do you mess up the ground to plant something that you can't eat, only to take the money of what you have planted, what you have sold, to buy the food that you must come back and eat? Then we need to change the strategy altogether. And we cannot keep our land as a supply of raw materials, and yet we will need the same money again to feed ourselves. So the balance between imports and export, and that's where the GDP sits, that's where currencies sit. How much have you exported? How much have you imported? At the end of the day, what we are exporting is equivalent to what we are importing in terms of basic necessities of food. So what do you end up having on the table? People have no money. Their currency is worth nothing. Why? Because they are hungry. What do they need? You need to import oil. You need to import food. You need to import medicine. You need to import this. At the end of the day, you're just working for the system. So we need to find a way of breaking that cycle of poverty. And agriculture is key to unlocking the potential of any country. The mother tongue, I'll start off with mother tongue before I get to agriculture. Education is important. Why do I emphasize the importance of our indigenous language? Our indigenous language is a science of its own. It contains the language, the words for the trees, the words for the grass, the words for seasons, the words for stones. And if you look very carefully at those words, you find that there's a whole technology that is involved in terms of what this tree works. For example, there's a tree down south we call mususu. Mususu is a bitter herb tree sort of thing. And the stomach of a human being in the south, we call it susu. So there you have it. You have a tree that is standing here, which the elders called mususu. And your gut is also called susu. Is it not interesting? That actually mususu is the medicine for the susu. And it is as good as connected, just like that. And so when you lose that language, and you call it antiquity, what, you give it some Italian name that they name it there, you already make the local people lose touch with the value of this. But education for me would be speaking to creating institutions of learning that introduce the young people to their own resources. You don't go to school to study so that you can write a CV. You go to school to study so that you can solve the problems in the community. Here is the model. Before you go to school, identify the problem in the community. Then go to school, study the problem, look for possible solution, have a proposal and a business plan of how to solve this problem. When you graduate, go back into the community and solve that problem. And while you are solving problems, you have created a business and you can charge a premium for your solving the problems. But we don't have an education system like that. We have an education system that gives you a degree. And the best thing you can write after your degree, I hereby apply for a job. I'm a team worker. I work under pressure. Like really? And there we end up with graduates that are not employed instead of graduates that are creating employment. Why? With so many engineers in Kenya, are we still having a problem of electricity? What were they doing in school? Why are we struggling with medicine? when you have so many doctors and pharmacists that have come out from the bush, who amongst all these doctors tomorrow morning will go to the bush and find msusu and make for us a tonic that cures stomach problems? No, it has not been tested. It has not been tested by who? Because our fathers have been doing this for the past thousands of years. Which part of clinical tests do you need? But anyway, if you need clinical tests, then test it and see if it won't work. So the concept of education, we don't need an education that teaches us about the other. We need an education that teaches us about ourselves. It should be illegal for any student to graduate as a graduate and does not know what is underneath his feet in terms of the resources that their country is offering, the raw materials that are underneath their feet, the trees that are around them, the flora that is around us, and how all these are possible opportunities of business, economics, and development. Here is an opportunity for innovation, creating new products that are on the market, creating new drugs that are on the market. Education must educate us. How do we convert our raw materials into business and into industry? And until we get there, we'll be manufacturing fools for the employment sector. It means that, therefore, that our educational institutions are manufacturing stations for the colonial system. We are simply producing them so that they can go. In fact, a more reckless definition of education, as we have it right now, education is a passport to run away from your community and go and become acceptable in the colonial system. So learn as much as you can and get out of here. Go where? Go there. If they come back, hallelujah. Many of them died there, and many of them are still going there. So what we're doing, we're spending so much money as governments and as families to educate each other, and yet we never have the benefit of what we have worked for. Yet to Zimbabwe, for example, 1/3 of our nurses and doctors have run out of the country. But how many parents paid for these children to go and study? How much money has the government spent on these people? And where are they right now? And who is enjoying the benefits from these people? It is the same colonial system. And then you say Africa is poor, when 1/4 of all the doctors in America are Nigerians and Ghanaians. The question is, if America is benefiting from their skills, what is the condition of their health systems in their own countries? Education becomes the weakest link when it teaches you how to run away from your own people. And you see them, we see them during holidays, when they come back home from town, these educated ones, when they fly back from the US with an accent and half, my man, mate, this. They can no longer sleep on the floor. They can no longer eat traditional foods. They can no longer do this because now they have been educated and they no longer understand these things. Weakest link we have is an education that exports you away from your own mother and your own father and your own community. And you spend all your life developing other communities and your own communities languishing in poverty. We need an education that is inward-looking than an education that is externally driven. The business and economics model is a big challenge because our present economics are based on lies. They're based on paper money. They're based on fake principles of stock exchange, which are not honest. We are coming from a barter system where we exchanged value for value. It does not make sense to me that you can buy my piece of land for 10,000 or 200,000 shillings and you give me paper money. And tomorrow morning, that paper money has lost value. I come back to you 2 years later, that same piece of land is now worth 1 million. Who was robbed here? You actually robbed me. Because you sold me, you took away from me what has value, and you gave me what has no value. That's why in the olden school, we used to do barter system. We exchanged things. We never sold land. None of us owned the land. The land owned us. From it we came, to it we were going to return. Therefore, land remained as the real estate on which all establishments went. And if we are supposed to do business, we don't do business that emulates Western businesses in terms, again, of just being suppliers of raw materials. We need modern African businesses that can do what I call reverse re-engineering.